What if your life suddenly turned upside down, and you had to raise 5 kids alone? Would you survive it? Jake Matthews sat on the edge of his bed, his hands trembling as he looked at the clock. The ticking sound of time was deafening in the otherwise quiet room. It had been 4 years since his wife, Sarah, had disappeared. 4 years since he'd last held her, kissed her goodbye, and thought it would only be a temporary separation. But here he was, a father of 5, a man who never in his wildest dreams could have imagined what he would face now. The door to the small bedroom creaked open, and a head popped inside. Max, his 16-year-old son, peeked in, his eyes filled with worry. "Dad, you okay?" he asked, stepping into the room and sitting next to him. Jake forced a smile, trying to reassure his son. "Yeah, just thinking. You know, about things." Max didn't buy it. He'd been watching his dad struggle for years now, trying to juggle the responsibilities of being both mom and dad. The weight of raising 5 kids on his own, the late nights spent working, and the exhaustion from it all, Max could see it all. He didn't say anything, though. He didn't need to. Max had learned early on that sometimes silence spoke louder than words. He sat with his father, the two of them sharing a moment of quiet understanding. In the 4 years since Sarah had left, Jake's life had been turned upside down. His job as a carpenter no longer paid enough to keep up with the demands of raising 5 children, so he worked double shifts every chance he got. The kids, Max, Emily, Luke, Zoe, and the youngest, Lily, had grown used to their father's absence, but not without feeling the void left by their mother. Jake stood up and glanced out the window. The morning light was breaking through the blinds, casting a soft glow across the room. It was a new day, but it felt like an old day. The same routine, the same responsibilities, and the same gnawing question that had haunted him for the past 4 years: where is Sarah? No one knew. Not even the police. After she left, there was no trace of her. No phone calls. No messages. Not a word. The only thing that remained was the echo of her absence. Jake had spent countless nights searching for answers, but all he had were dead ends and unanswered prayers. And every time he thought he could move on, every time he thought he could give up hope, something pulled him back. Max stood up and clapped his hand on Jake's shoulder, shaking him out of his thoughts. "We're all gonna be okay, Dad. You're doing great. We've got each other." Jake gave a small nod, feeling a lump form in his throat. Max was right, in a way. They had made it this far. But the truth was, Jake didn't know how much longer he could keep pretending everything was fine. The burden of keeping his family together was weighing on him, and no matter how strong he tried to be, he felt like he was constantly on the edge of breaking down. That morning, after the kids had gone off to school, Jake did what he always did. He checked the mail. It was a habit that had started when Sarah left, hoping against hope that one day, a letter would arrive, a sign that she was out there, that she was okay. But there was never anything. Not a single thing that would offer any closure. But today was different. A small envelope, plain and simple, sat at the bottom of the mailbox. There was no return address, just his name scrawled on the front. He froze, heart racing. Could it be? The thought that maybe, just maybe, this was a letter from Sarah sent a wave of hope crashing over him. His hands shook as he opened it, his breath catching in his throat. Inside was a single piece of paper. The handwriting was unmistakable. Sarah's. "Jake. I'm coming back. Sarah." That was it. No explanation. No further details. Just those 3 simple words that made Jake's heart stop. For a moment, he stood there, staring at the paper in disbelief. Was it real? Could this truly be happening after all this time? Was his wife really coming back after abandoning him and their children for so long? His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of his phone vibrating in his pocket. It was a text from Emily, his 14-year-old daughter. "Dad, where are you? We need to talk." Something's up. Jake quickly slipped the letter into his pocket and walked back inside, trying to keep his emotions in check. His mind was racing. What did this mean for their family? Could he trust Sarah again? Was she coming back for good? And most importantly, what did this mean for the kids? When he entered the living room, the kids were already sitting on the couch, their faces a mixture of confusion and concern. Emily, the oldest girl after Max, looked up at him. "Dad, what's going on? You're acting weird." Jake sighed, rubbing his face. He hadn't been this rattled in years. His kids had grown up so fast, and yet here they were, still relying on him to hold everything together. But now, with this letter in his pocket, everything felt like it was about to change. "I got a letter today," Jake said, his voice shaking. "It's from your mom." The room fell silent. The kids looked at him in disbelief. For years, they had lived without her, and now, just like that, she was coming back. It didn't make sense. Max was the first to speak. "What do you mean, she's coming back? Is it really her?" Jake nodded, but even he wasn't sure what to think. He wasn't prepared for this moment, not after all this time. How could he be? How could he suddenly welcome Sarah back into their lives after everything she had done? "I don't know what this means yet," Jake said, his voice cracking slightly. "But we'll figure it out together. We have to. No matter what." The kids sat in stunned silence, processing what Jake had just told them. None of them spoke for what felt like an eternity, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Was it even possible to forgive Sarah after all this time? Jake looked at his children, each of them with their own struggles and their own scars from the past. But in this moment, he knew one thing for sure: no matter what happened next, they were in this together. The sudden reappearance of Sarah had shaken the foundations of their family. But Jake knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. He was about to face the most challenging chapter of his life, one he could never have prepared for. Could their family survive this new twist in their story? What will happen when Sarah returns? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The next morning, the house was eerily quiet. Jake had hardly slept a wink the night before, his mind still racing from the letter. "Sarah's coming back." The words echoed in his head like an unanswered prayer. But what did it mean? Could he really trust her? Could they ever go back to the way things were? He sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at a half-empty mug of coffee, his mind swirling with questions and doubt. The kids had left for school, leaving him alone with his thoughts. He had hoped that the silence would give him clarity, but all it did was deepen the confusion. Jake wasn't sure when it happened, but somewhere along the way, he had stopped believing Sarah would ever return. When she left, she didn't just walk out the door, she disappeared without a trace, vanishing like smoke in the wind. No goodbyes. No explanations. It had been a cruel blow, and the weight of it had hit him harder than he cared to admit. At first, he kept hoping, every day, every week, that she would come back. But then the hope faded, and the anger and sadness took its place. The first year had been the hardest. Raising 5 kids alone was nothing like he'd imagined. It was chaos, exhaustion, and constant juggling. Max had stepped up in ways Jake never could have expected. He had become the man of the house, helping with the younger kids and taking on responsibilities that no teenager should have to bear. Emily, too, had taken on a motherly role, especially for Zoe and Lily, the youngest. Jake had always tried to shield them from his own pain, but the cracks were there, undeniable. He had cried in the shower, away from their eyes. He had yelled at them when he was too tired to think straight. And he had struggled to maintain the fragile balance of his work and home life, often letting one slip while trying to hold on to the other. It wasn't that he didn't love his kids, he adored them. But there were days when the weight of it all felt too heavy. Days when he thought he might break. There were nights when he would lie in bed, listening to the sound of the house creaking, the silence of an empty room pressing down on him. And now, with Sarah's return hanging over him like a storm cloud, he didn't know what to feel. He wanted to be angry. He had every right to be. But part of him, deep down, still longed for the woman he had once loved. Was that normal? Was that even fair to his kids? He stood up abruptly, pushing the chair back and pacing the kitchen. He needed something to do. Something to take his mind off of everything. But the only thing he could think about was Sarah, and the chaos she was about to bring back into their lives. Later that afternoon, as he picked up the kids from school, Jake felt the weight of his own nerves building. Max was unusually quiet in the car, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Emily and Luke were arguing over something trivial in the back seat, and Zoe and Lily were already bickering over who got to sit next to their dad. The usual noise of the Matthews kids filled the car, but Jake couldn't focus. He was too preoccupied with what was coming next. They arrived home, and as the kids scrambled out of the car, Jake sat there for a moment, staring at the front door. What will I tell them? How do I prepare them for this? His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a message from Max. Dad, are we really going to let her back into our lives? Jake stared at the message, his heart pounding in his chest. Max's words hit him hard. Are we really going to let her back into our lives? He didn't know how to answer. In fact, he wasn't sure he had the right answer. The truth was, he didn't know what to do. He couldn't just pretend like everything was okay, that Sarah's disappearance hadn't torn their family apart. But he also couldn't deny the hope, however small, that maybe, just maybe, Sarah had changed. Maybe she had a good reason for leaving. Or maybe she didn't. The uncertainty gnawed at him, and he didn't have the answers. He never had the answers. As the evening wore on, Jake found himself pacing the living room, anxiously awaiting the inevitable. The kids had gathered in the living room, talking amongst themselves, but the tension was palpable. No one was really saying much, but everyone knew that something big was about to happen. Max and Emily exchanged quiet glances as Jake entered the room. He could feel the weight of their eyes on him, waiting for him to say something. But what could he say? He took a deep breath and sat down on the couch, trying to gather his thoughts. Okay, he began, his voice steady but unsure. I know things have been strange lately. And I know you guys have a lot of questions. But there's something I need to tell you, and it's going to be a big change for all of us. He paused, looking around at each of their faces. Zoe and Lily were still too young to fully grasp the situation, but Max, Emily, and Luke were old enough to understand the weight of his words. Your mom, she's coming back. The room went still. A silence settled in, thick and heavy, as the kids processed the news. Max looked away first, clearly struggling with his emotions. Emily clenched her fists, her jaw tightening. Luke, ever the optimist, asked the question that no one had the courage to ask. Is she coming back to stay? Jake swallowed hard. He had no idea. I don't know, he admitted, his voice breaking slightly. But what I do know is that we have to figure this out together. No matter what, we're a family, and we're going to face this together. Max stood up suddenly, shaking his head. You can't be serious, Dad. After everything, after she left us, now you're just going to let her back in like nothing happened. Jake's heart sank. He could hear the anger and confusion in Max's voice, and it tore him apart. Max, I don't know what's going to happen. But she's still your mom. And maybe she's changed. Maybe she's ready to come back. But that doesn't mean we have to forget what happened. We don't forget, we don't ignore, and we don't just move on. But we do need to figure out how to move forward, together. Max didn't say anything else. He just turned and walked out of the room, his footsteps heavy as he retreated to his room. Jake sat there, feeling a lump form in his throat. He had hoped for a smoother conversation, but he knew deep down that the road ahead was going to be anything but easy. That night, as Jake lay in bed, the letter from Sarah clutched in his hand, he couldn't shake the overwhelming feeling of uncertainty. What now? He didn't know how to answer that question. And as much as he wanted to believe that everything could return to normal, he knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter, one that would bring more pain, more healing, and more growth than he could ever imagine. The return of Sarah Matthews would change everything. But was their family strong enough to handle it? Only time would tell. The morning after Jake's conversation with the kids, he woke up feeling like the weight of the world had been placed on his shoulders. The house was unusually quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos of the previous night. Max was still upset, storming off to his room after their talk. Emily was distant, lost in thought, and the younger kids, Zoe and Lily, seemed oblivious to the gravity of the situation, playing with their toys as if nothing had changed. Jake couldn't escape the feeling that something was about to shatter, something he wasn't prepared for. Even with all the time he had spent in survival mode, trying to hold everything together, he had never truly prepared himself for the possibility of Sarah's return. He had convinced himself she was gone for good, that it was just him and the kids now. And now, in an instant, everything was thrown into chaos again. He couldn't just sit around, waiting for Sarah to walk through that door. He needed answers, and he needed them now. He had sent her a simple message the night before after the kids went to bed. What do you mean you're coming back? Why now? After everything? No response. It was starting to feel more like a cruel joke. The hope that had sparked inside him when he first read the letter now seemed like a distant memory. The waiting game was always the hardest part, especially when he had no idea what was going to happen next. By the afternoon, the kids were home from school. Jake could sense the tension in the house, the way Max and Emily moved through the rooms, their eyes lingering on him as if waiting for some kind of explanation. But what could he say? He didn't have any answers. Jake had spent the last couple of hours trying to get a hold of Sarah, but she wasn't picking up her phone. It was a familiar feeling, the helplessness of not knowing where she was or what she was doing. Just like before, it was as if she'd vanished without a trace, leaving him with nothing but the remnants of her absence. But unlike last time, he couldn't afford to be passive. Not with the kids watching, not with his family on the line. The doorbell rang suddenly, interrupting his spiraling thoughts. Jake stood up quickly, his heart racing. Was it her? Was Sarah standing on the other side of that door, ready to face everything she'd left behind? He took a deep breath before opening the door. When he saw her standing there, the breath left his lungs. There she was, Sarah Matthews, his wife. She looked older, worn, but still the same woman who had once been his world. Her eyes were filled with a mixture of uncertainty and determination. Her blonde hair, once styled and perfect, was now unkempt, as if she had been through her own struggles. She wasn't wearing the kind of clothes she used to, the fancy dresses or the pristine outfits, but instead had on jeans and a plain shirt, almost like she was trying to fit in with the life she had left behind. For a moment, neither of them spoke. It was as if they were both frozen in time, unsure of where to go from here. Jake's mind raced, and 1,000 questions came flooding to the surface. Why now? Where have you been? What do you want from us? But his mouth remained shut. He wasn't ready to unleash all his emotions, not yet. Not until he could understand what was happening. Finally, Sarah spoke, her voice soft and hesitant. Jake. I don't know where to begin. Jake stepped back, opening the door wider to let her in. There was no anger in his eyes, but there was something else, something deeper. Something that said, this isn't over. This can't be over so easily. You said you were coming back, he said, his voice rough, but you didn't say why. Why now, Sarah? It's been 4 years. 4 years without a word. And now you just show up, like nothing happened. She swallowed hard, glancing at the floor before looking back up at him. I know. I know I don't have any right to ask for forgiveness. I don't even know if you can ever forgive me. But I need to explain. I wasn't myself when I left. I was lost. And I didn't know how to find my way back. Jake clenched his fists, frustration bubbling inside him. We needed you, Sarah. The kids needed you. I needed you. I know. I know, she whispered, her voice cracking. I'm so sorry, Jake. I don't expect everything to go back to the way it was. I know it's going to take time, but I've changed. I've learned so much these past few years. And I want to be here. For you. For the kids. Jake shook his head, unable to fully process her words. You want to be here? He let out a bitter laugh. What does that even mean? You disappeared without a trace, and now you want to come back and act like everything is fine. Like you didn't just leave us to pick up the pieces. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. I didn't want to leave you, Jake. I didn't want to leave the kids. But I was scared. I didn't know how to deal with everything, the pressure, the responsibilities, the feeling that I was losing myself. I was drowning, and instead of asking for help, I ran. I ran because I thought I was weak. But I see now that running only made things worse. I thought I could find myself, but all I found was emptiness. And now I'm here, hoping you'll give me a chance to make it right. Jake took a deep breath, his emotions raw. He could feel the conflict inside of him, the part of him that still loved her, that still wanted her to be a part of their lives. But the hurt was still there. The anger. The years of loneliness, of having to be both mother and father to their kids, of struggling without her. Sarah, Jake said quietly, his voice thick with emotion, the kids, they don't know what to think. They're confused, and honestly, so am I. You can't just waltz back into our lives like nothing happened. You've got to understand that. She nodded, tears slipping down her face. I understand. I do. And I'm not asking for everything to be okay right away. I know it'll take time. But I want to prove that I can be the person you all need me to be. Jake ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of her words. I don't know if I can believe you yet, Sarah. I don't know if I can trust you again. She stepped forward, placing a hand on his arm. I don't expect you to trust me overnight. But I'll do whatever it takes to earn it back. Please, Jake. I'm not asking for you to forget, but I'm asking for a chance to make things right. For our family. Jake looked at her, the woman he had once loved more than anything, the woman who had torn their family apart and now was trying to come back. And deep down, he knew that giving her a chance would mean risking his heart once again. But he also knew something else. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the kids. They had to be a part of this, and if Sarah wanted back in, she would have to prove herself to them, too. I don't know, Sarah, Jake said, his voice softer now. I don't know if we're ready for this. She nodded again, looking down. I understand. But I'm here. And I'll do whatever it takes. As Sarah stood in the doorway of their home, the words of her apology still hanging in the air, Jake knew one thing for sure, the road ahead was going to be a long and difficult one. But for the first time in years, there was a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, their broken family could find a way to heal. But could they ever truly forgive her? Would they ever be able to move forward together? Only time would tell. The next few days felt like walking through a fog for Jake. He hadn't expected Sarah's return to be easy, but he wasn't prepared for just how hard it would be to navigate this new dynamic. The kids were still adjusting, trying to wrap their heads around the fact that their mother was back after all this time. Max, in particular, was struggling. He had always been the one to hold on to anger the longest, the one who refused to let anyone get too close. And now, with Sarah's unexpected reappearance, he was more withdrawn than ever. Emily, on the other hand, had been quiet but more open to the idea of Sarah's return. She was torn between the love she still had for her mother and the frustration of how easily Sarah had walked away from them. But Emily was pragmatic. She understood the complexities of people, even when she didn't want to. The younger kids, Zoe and Lily, were too young to fully understand what had happened, but they could feel the tension in the air. Their innocent questions about when Mommy was going to stay or why Mommy left stung in ways Jake wasn't ready to face. They didn't have the years of anger or confusion the older kids had, but they could sense the cracks in the family. Sarah had tried, in her own way, to connect with each of them. She sat down with Max, talking to him in private, though he refused to open up. With Emily, she made small gestures, helping with homework, cooking dinner, but it was clear that Emily wasn't ready to accept her back fully. It was hard to blame her. Jake spent his days in a haze, caught between trying to be a supportive partner to Sarah and a father trying to hold his family together. The stress of it all was overwhelming. He found himself working late more often, just to avoid the tension at home. One evening, after dinner, Sarah suggested they all sit down together and talk. "I know this has been hard for all of us," she said, her voice low and steady. "But I want to make things right. I want us to have a chance to be a family again. I know it's not going to happen overnight, but I'm willing to put in the work. I'll do whatever it takes." Jake glanced around the table at the kids. Max sat with his arms crossed, staring out the window. Emily fiddled with her fork, her lips pressed together in a tight line. Zoe and Lily were playing with their food, oblivious to the gravity of the situation. "You're not the only one who has to prove themselves, Sarah," Max finally spoke up, his voice flat. "We have to figure out if we even want you back. You can't just waltz in here like everything is fine and expect us to forget everything that happened." Jake felt a pang of guilt in his chest. He hadn't realized how much Max was still carrying. The anger was still there, simmering just beneath the surface. "I get it, Max," Sarah said quietly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I don't expect things to be easy. But I want you to know that I'm not going anywhere this time. I'm here for good." "I don't believe that," Max shot back, his voice cracking with emotion. "You said that last time. You left without even a word. Do you have any idea how that felt? Do you?" Sarah's face softened, and for the first time since she returned, Jake saw the guilt in her eyes. It wasn't just regret, it was the weight of the pain she had caused, the deep understanding that she couldn't just fix everything with words. But how could she make it right? How could she prove herself to Max, to the others, when she had already walked away once? "Max, I don't expect you to forgive me today, or tomorrow," she said softly. "But I want to try. I really do." Max pushed back from the table and stood up, walking out of the room without another word. The door slammed behind him, and the sound echoed through the house. Emily sighed heavily. "This isn't easy for any of us, Mom. You just don't get to come back and pretend nothing happened. We've had to live without you, without any explanation. We've learned to survive without you. And now you expect us to just open up and let you back in?" "I don't want you to forget what happened," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "I just want a chance to make it right. And I'm not asking for things to be perfect. I'm asking for time." Jake, who had been silent through most of this exchange, finally spoke up. "I don't know, Sarah. I really don't know how this is going to work. We're all so different now. I'm different. The kids are different. I don't even know where to begin." "You begin by taking it one day at a time," Sarah said quietly, her gaze meeting his. "You don't have to forgive me all at once. But if we don't start somewhere, we'll never have a chance." Jake looked at her for a long moment, his heart torn between the woman he had loved and the reality of the situation. He wasn't sure how to move forward, but one thing was clear, this wasn't going to be easy. Not for any of them. Over the next few weeks, life at home became a delicate dance. Sarah did her best to integrate back into the family, taking things slow and respecting the boundaries the kids had set. She helped with homework, made dinner when Jake was working late, and tried to make small talk with the kids, even though most of them remained distant. Max still wasn't having it. He refused to let Sarah in, spending most of his time holed up in his room. He didn't even acknowledge her when she tried to talk to him, and his anger, unspoken but very real, was palpable. Jake didn't know how to help him, didn't know how to fix the rift that had formed between mother and son. Emily was a little more receptive, though still guarded. She would talk to Sarah occasionally, but only in short, polite exchanges. Emily was torn between the girl who had once adored her mother and the woman who had walked out on them. She wasn't sure how to reconcile the two versions of Sarah in her mind. Zoe and Lily, for their part, were just happy to have their mom back. They asked questions about where she had been and why she had stayed away, but they weren't as angry or hurt as the older kids. To them, Sarah was just another part of their world returning. They didn't fully understand what had happened, but they knew that their mom was there, and that was enough for now. Jake, meanwhile, was walking a tightrope. He wanted to make things work. He really did. But the reality of Sarah's return was a constant reminder of everything that had been broken. The kids' pain, the years of struggle, the emptiness he had felt when she left, it was all there, hanging over them like a dark cloud. And while there were moments of hope, of connection, the tension was always there, just beneath the surface. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Jake and Sarah sat together on the couch, the room quiet except for the soft hum of the television. Sarah turned to him, her eyes tired but filled with sincerity. "I know it's hard," she said softly. "I know I don't deserve a second chance, but I'm asking for one anyway. For the sake of the kids, for the sake of us. Can we try?" Jake hesitated, his gaze fixed on the floor. He wasn't sure if he could forgive her, wasn't sure if he could open up his heart again after everything that had happened. But as he looked up at her, at the woman who had once been everything to him, he knew one thing: for the sake of their family, he had to try. "I don't know what this looks like," Jake said, his voice heavy with uncertainty. "But I'm willing to give it a shot. For the kids. For us." Sarah smiled softly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Thank you," she whispered. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And for the first time in a long while, Jake felt a small flicker of hope. The days following Jake's fragile agreement to give Sarah a chance were filled with moments of awkwardness, hesitant smiles, and careful conversations. Sarah was doing her best to integrate back into the family, but the path to healing wasn't a smooth one. It was like trying to patch up an old quilt: some pieces were frayed, others torn, and there was no guarantee the stitching would hold. The kids, especially Max, were still angry. Max's anger wasn't just directed at Sarah, it was a storm inside him, a frustration with life itself that had built up over the years. He had lost his mother, had to grow up too quickly, and now the one person he had learned to live without was suddenly trying to come back. The idea that things could go back to the way they were seemed impossible to him. Jake watched his son from a distance, knowing how hard this was for him. As much as he understood Max's pain, he also knew that if they were going to rebuild, it had to start with them learning to trust each other again. That would take time, a lot of time. Emily was quieter these days, not as openly angry as Max but still clearly conflicted. She didn't want to appear as if she was okay with everything, but she also didn't want to alienate Sarah completely. Emily was trying to balance her memories of the past with the reality of the present, and it wasn't easy. The younger girls, Zoe and Lily, had been the only ones unaffected by the changes. To them, their mother's return was a reason for excitement. They ran to Sarah when she came home, hugging her tightly, asking her 1,000 questions about what she had been doing and why she had been gone for so long. Sarah's heart ached at the innocent joy in their faces. It reminded her of everything she had missed out on, everything she had taken for granted before. But as much as Sarah tried, she couldn't change the past. And the past loomed large, particularly for Max. He refused to acknowledge her when she attempted to sit with him or talk to him. It hurt her deeply, but Sarah knew that his pain couldn't be fixed overnight. She had to show him, slowly, that she was willing to stay. One afternoon, Jake found himself sitting alone in the kitchen, staring at his coffee cup. He had just finished a long day of work and hadn't yet heard from Sarah or the kids. The house was unusually quiet. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, pulling him from his thoughts. He stood up and walked to the door, wondering who it could be. When he opened it, he was surprised to find Max standing on the doorstep, looking hesitant. "Hey, Max," Jake greeted him, surprised. "Everything okay?" Max hesitated, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. He wasn't looking Jake in the eye. I need to talk to you," he said quietly. Jake raised an eyebrow but stepped aside to let him in. "Sure. What's going on?" They moved to the living room, and Max sat on the edge of the couch, still avoiding eye contact. Jake took a seat across from him, feeling the tension in the room. He knew this moment was important, but he wasn't sure what Max needed to say. After a long silence, Max spoke, his voice low. "I don't get it, Dad. I don't understand why Mom's back. I don't understand how you can just let her come back after everything she did." Jake's heart sank, but he kept his voice calm. "I don't know if I understand it either, Max. But we have to try. We've been through a lot, and I'm not saying it's going to be easy. But your mom is trying. She's trying to make things right." Max's eyes flashed with anger. "Trying? You think she can just fix everything with a couple of sorries? She left us, Dad. She left you, and she left me. And now she thinks she can just come back and act like nothing happened." "I get it," Jake said quietly. "I really do. But I'm not asking you to forgive her right now. I'm not asking you to forget. I'm just asking you to give her a chance to prove herself." Max shook his head, his hands clenching into fists. "I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can ever trust her again." Jake leaned forward, meeting his son's gaze. "Max, I can't make you forgive her. I can't make you accept her. But I need you to understand something. Your mom wants to be here. She wants to be a part of this family again. And we can't heal if we hold on to all the anger. You don't have to trust her overnight, but at least try. For the sake of everyone, okay?" Max stared at his father for a long time, his jaw tightening. "I'll try," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "But I'm not promising anything." Jake nodded. "That's all I'm asking for. Just try." Max stood up and walked toward the door, but before leaving, he stopped and looked back at Jake. "I'm still mad at her, Dad. I don't know if I'll ever stop being mad at her. But I'll try." Jake watched his son leave, his heart heavy but hopeful. It was a small step, but it was progress. Later that night, after the kids were tucked into bed, Sarah joined Jake in the living room. He had been sitting quietly, reading through some old papers, but he could tell that Sarah was waiting for him to say something. He put the papers down and turned to her. "Max came to talk to me today," Jake said, his voice soft but serious. Sarah looked up at him, a mixture of hope and fear in her eyes. "And, what did he say?" "He's angry. He doesn't get why you came back, and he doesn't know if he can ever trust you again," Jake replied. "But he's willing to try. He's willing to give you a chance." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she sat down beside him. "I never wanted to hurt him. I never wanted to leave. I just didn't know how to handle everything, Jake. I was so lost." "I know," Jake said, his voice gentle. "I know. But that doesn't change what happened. What matters now is that you're here. And you have to show him, show all of them, that you're here for good. That you're not going anywhere." "I will," Sarah said, her voice steady with determination. I will do whatever it takes. I'll prove to them that I can be the mother they need. That I can be the wife you need. Jake nodded, a weight lifting off his shoulders for the first time in a long while. It wouldn't be easy. There would be more struggles ahead, more misunderstandings, more pain. But maybe, just maybe, they could get through this together. As they sat there, in the quiet of their home, there was a sense of something new beginning, something fragile but real. The days passed slowly, like each moment was stretched thin by the tension in the air. The house had become a delicate dance of cautious conversations, careful gestures, and moments of silence that said more than words ever could. Sarah was trying, Jake was trying, and the kids, well, the kids were still figuring out how to process the whirlwind that had suddenly entered their lives. Max was still distant, retreating more and more into his room. He barely spoke to anyone, even to Jake. Jake had tried to reach out, but Max's walls were thick, built up over years of disappointment, and no amount of pleading could break them down. It was harder for Emily, too. She was walking a tightrope between wanting to trust her mother again and the lingering pain of being abandoned. She wasn't angry, at least, not in the way Max was, but she was confused. Every time she looked at Sarah, it was like seeing a stranger wrapped in the skin of the woman who used to tuck her in at night, the woman who used to hold her when the world felt too big. Zoe and Lily, still blissfully unaware of the gravity of the situation, continued to be the bright spots in the house. They adored their mom, and seeing them run to Sarah with open arms every evening when she came home from work was a painful reminder to Sarah of how much time she had lost. Jake had his own struggles. He was caught between trying to be the supportive husband Sarah needed and the father who had already been taking care of everything for so long. His heart ached for the kids. He didn't know how to help them, how to guide them through the maze of their feelings. He didn't know how to make things right, but every day he woke up, he tried. One afternoon, Jake found himself at the park with Zoe and Lily. He'd promised them they could spend some time outside, and while they played on the swings and climbed the jungle gym, Jake took the opportunity to clear his head. He needed the fresh air, needed the quiet. As he sat on a bench, his thoughts kept drifting back to Sarah, back to the house. He hadn't seen her much today. She had left early for a work meeting and was due back in the late afternoon. The kids hadn't been as on edge, but the weight of everything hung in the air like a heavy fog, unspoken and thick. His phone buzzed in his pocket, snapping him from his reverie. It was a message from Emily. "Dad, when is Mom coming back? She said she would be home by now, but I haven't heard from her." Jake sighed, his heart sinking. It was hard not to feel the old resentment creeping in, even though he knew this wasn't Sarah's fault. Still, the constant uncertainty felt like a weight on everyone. He quickly typed a response, trying to sound reassuring. "She's probably just caught up with work. I'll give her a call and let you know if anything changes. I'm sure she'll be back soon." Max was right, Jake thought. It was easy for him to tell Sarah to try, but what about the kids? What about Max, who could barely look at her without anger bubbling to the surface? What about Emily, who was caught between hope and caution? But he couldn't dwell on that now. The girls were running toward him, laughing and yelling for him to watch them swing higher. He smiled, the sight of them lightening his heart. Back at home, things were tense in a way Jake hadn't expected. He had returned from the park with the girls to find Sarah sitting at the kitchen table, her hands folded together tightly in front of her. She looked tired, more than usual, and there was a heaviness in the way she sat. "Hey," Jake said softly, stepping into the kitchen. "Long day?" Sarah glanced up at him, and he could see the exhaustion in her eyes. "Yeah, it's been tough. The workload's been piling up, and I've been thinking about everything. About us. About the kids." Jake pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. "They're struggling, Sarah. They're all struggling. Max especially." "I know," she said quietly. "I don't know what to do. Every time I try, it feels like I just make things worse. Jake took a deep breath. He wanted to reassure her, to tell her that it wasn't all on her, that they would figure this out together. But he couldn't lie. It wasn't easy. Nothing about this was easy. Maybe it's time we try something different, Jake said after a pause. We're all just kind of walking around each other, waiting for something to change, but maybe we need to actually do something to move forward. Sarah looked up at him, curiosity replacing the worry in her eyes. What do you mean? I don't know, Jake said, running a hand through his hair. Maybe it's time for us to all sit down, really talk. I mean, not just small talk, not just, how was your day? But really talk. Maybe Max needs to know that it's not just you and me trying to fix things for him. Maybe we need to show him we're all in this together. Sarah nodded slowly, taking in what he was saying. I guess I could try talking to him. I know he's angry, but I don't want to force him. I don't want him to feel like I'm pushing him too much. I get that, Jake said. But he's not going to open up unless we show him that it's okay. We can't keep walking around this thing forever. There was a long pause as both of them sat, lost in their thoughts. I'll try, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I need you to help me, Jake. I need you to support me through this. I don't want to lose them again. You're not going to lose them, Jake said firmly, reaching across the table and squeezing her hand. We'll do this together. But you have to believe that it's going to take time. There's no quick fix. Sarah nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I know. I just want them back. I want us back. Jake smiled softly, his heart breaking for her. We'll get there. We have to. That evening, after dinner, Jake gathered the kids in the living room. The air was thick with unspoken words, but there was a determination in Jake's voice as he spoke. Kids, we need to talk. We've been going through a lot, all of us. And I know things aren't perfect, and they won't be for a while, but we can't just keep pretending like everything's fine when it's not. Your mom's here now, and she's trying. And I need you all to understand that she's not going anywhere this time. Max crossed his arms, glaring at the floor. Yeah, well, I'm not sure I believe that. I know, Jake said quietly. I know it's hard. But I need you to give her a chance, Max. She's here, and she wants to make things right. And I'm asking you to try. I'm asking all of you to try. There was silence, the weight of the moment hanging in the air. Emily spoke up, her voice soft but steady. We just need time, Dad. It's not easy for any of us. We're all still trying to figure out what this looks like. I get that, Jake said. But we're a family. And we need to start acting like one again. All of us. Together. The room was quiet again, but this time it felt different. There was a sense of something tentative, something fragile but real, taking root. Jake didn't know if everything would ever go back to normal. But he knew they had to try. And that was a start. The following weeks felt like a slow progression. Not a steady march forward, but a hesitant shuffle, one step forward, then 2 steps back. The dynamics in the house were changing, but it wasn't easy. There were still moments of tension, moments where the past seemed to loom over everything. But there were also small, quiet victories. One of those victories came unexpectedly one Friday evening. Sarah had been taking the kids out for ice cream, trying to break the ice with them one small scoop at a time. It was something she'd always done when they were younger, and even though it felt like a lifetime ago, she hoped it could spark some semblance of connection again. Max had been distant as usual, sitting in the back seat with his arms crossed, his eyes glued to his phone. Emily was more engaged, laughing at something Zoe had said. Zoe and Lily were already talking about what flavor they wanted as Sarah drove them to the shop. But Max? He was hard to read, distant, lost in his own world. Sarah sighed, but she didn't give up. She was trying. That was all she could do for now. When they got to the ice cream shop, the bright colors and the sound of kids playing outside seemed to bring Zoe and Lily back to life. They ran ahead, eager to choose their favorite toppings. Emily was right behind them, but Max was still trailing behind. Max, Sarah said, trying to catch his attention. She smiled softly. How about you pick your favorite flavor? You never know, it might make you feel better. Max barely looked at her, then shrugged. I don't care. I don't need anything. His coldness stung, but Sarah refused to let it show. Come on, just pick something. It'll make you feel better, I promise. Max shot her a quick glance, then turned away. I'm fine. Sarah watched him for a moment, her heart aching, but then she turned back to the other kids. As the day wore on, she kept trying. She would engage Max in little conversations, nothing too big, but enough to show him she was there, that she wasn't going anywhere. It wasn't until the following week that something started to change. It was late evening, and the house was quiet after dinner. The kids were finishing up their homework in the living room, their pens scratching away at their notebooks. Sarah had been in the kitchen cleaning up, but she found herself drifting in and out of the living room, checking on them. She had to admit, it was hard not to feel the strain between them. Max was still avoiding her, still angry. But Emily had started to open up just a little. She'd begun to speak to Sarah with a touch more warmth, asking her about her day, telling her about things at school. It wasn't much, but it was a sign. Then, out of nowhere, Max stood up from the couch and walked toward her. Sarah froze, her heart suddenly pounding. I want to talk, Max said, his voice more controlled than she expected. Sarah's breath caught in her chest. Was this it? Was he finally going to say something? She swallowed the lump in her throat and nodded, taking a seat at the kitchen table. Okay, Max. What's on your mind? He hesitated for a long moment, his hands shoved into his pockets, his eyes shifting around. But finally, he spoke, his voice low. I don't get it, Mom. I don't get how you can just come back after everything. After you left. I've had to live with that for so long. And now, you're here. But it's like, everything's different. I don't know who you are anymore. Sarah's heart broke. But she didn't flinch. She needed to hear this. Max, she began, her voice trembling, I don't expect you to understand. I don't even understand why I did what I did. All I can say is that I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for leaving you. I made a huge mistake, and I can't take it back. But I want to make things right, no matter how long it takes. I want to be here for you. Max didn't speak for a moment, his eyes flicking away from hers. I don't know if I can just forget that, Mom. You don't know what it's been like without you. It's been me and Dad trying to make it work, and now you're back, and I'm just not ready. I understand, Sarah said softly. And I'm not asking you to forgive me right now. I'm asking you to give me a chance. To give us a chance. We don't have to fix everything in one night. But I need you to know that I'm here for you now, and I'm not leaving again. Max seemed to consider this for a moment, his jaw tightening before he spoke again. I'll try, he said quietly, almost as though the words hurt to say. But don't expect me to trust you right away. That's all I can ask for, Sarah said, tears welling in her eyes. I'll take whatever you give me, Max. But I promise, I'm not going anywhere. Max nodded, then turned to walk away. Before he left the room, he stopped and glanced back at her. I'm still mad at you, he said. But I'll try. I'll try to give you a chance. Thank you, Sarah whispered, watching him leave. For the first time in a long time, Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a complete turnaround. But it was a start. The next few days were a delicate dance. Max didn't suddenly open up and become the loving son Sarah had once known, but he was no longer cold and distant either. He was still guarded, still angry, but he was beginning to let her in, little by little. There were moments, small moments, when they shared brief glances, or when he would ask her for help with something, or when he simply sat beside her on the couch without pulling away. It wasn't much, but to Sarah, it felt like everything. Emily, too, was showing subtle signs of change. She began spending more time with Sarah, helping her with household chores, talking about her day at school, asking her about work. It was as if the wall between them was slowly coming down, brick by brick. Zoe and Lily, of course, were the easiest. Their excitement about having Sarah back had never waned. They still clung to her as if nothing had changed, and in some ways, that simple, unfiltered love was exactly what Sarah needed to hold on to. And then there was Jake. Jake was still there, steady as ever. He was her rock, her constant in the storm. His quiet support, his understanding when she needed it most, it was everything she could have hoped for and more. Together, they were rebuilding. Piece by piece. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah realized that this wasn't just about winning back her children's trust. It was about rebuilding the entire family, learning to live together again, and navigating through the pain and the healing. There would be setbacks. There would be moments when they would stumble. But for the first time in a long while, Sarah truly believed they had a chance. The house was quiet, too quiet. It was a rainy Sunday, the kind that made everything feel still and heavy. Outside, the wind rattled the windows like it had something urgent to say. Inside, Sarah stood alone in the hallway, holding a weathered box she hadn't seen in over a decade. She had found it in the back of the attic while cleaning. Dusty, taped at the corners, and covered in faint writing, her handwriting. Inside were the remnants of a life she'd packed away and abandoned, old baby photos, scribbled Mother's Day cards, crayon drawings, and even a few handwritten notes she'd left Jake during their early years of marriage. It felt like opening a time capsule buried by someone she barely recognized anymore. She sat on the floor and began sorting through it all. With each photograph, a memory surfaced. Max's first steps. Emily dressed as a fairy princess. Jake asleep on the couch with Zoe curled against his chest. Lily's first birthday cake, mostly smeared across her face and in her hair. Tears welled up as Sarah clutched a picture of her holding all 5 kids, Jake's arm around her shoulder, a warmth in their eyes that now felt foreign. She realized, painfully, how much life had moved on without her. Later that afternoon, Jake walked in and found her still on the hallway floor, surrounded by old memories. He sat down beside her, picking up one of the drawings. Max made this when he was 5. I remember that day. He swore the stick figure was me, said the giant smile meant I was the best daddy ever. Sarah gave a weak smile. I missed all of it. Every little moment. I don't even remember packing this box. Jake looked at her, not with judgment, but with empathy. You were overwhelmed back then. We both were. But you kept things like this for a reason. Part of you still hoped you'd come back, didn't you? Sarah nodded, voice barely audible. I just didn't think I'd deserve to. There was a long silence between them before Jake spoke again. You're here now. And that counts. But you have to stop punishing yourself. The kids need a mother, not a ghost who haunts the halls with guilt. His words pierced her like truth often does, sharp and cleansing. That evening, Sarah approached Emily. She was in the dining room, working on a school project about family lineage. It felt like fate. Sarah sat down beside her, gently. Need any help? She asked. Emily glanced up, wary. I'm fine. Sarah nodded, respecting the space. I saw you had some photos from the old albums. I found a box earlier. I thought maybe we could add to it. Fill in some of the blanks. Emily paused. Like, from before. Sarah gave her a soft smile. Yeah. From before. I want to help you remember it, not just the parts when I wasn't here, but the ones when I was. If that's okay. Emily hesitated, then nodded slowly. Okay. Maybe just for a bit. For the next hour, they spread the photos across the table. Sarah pointed out stories behind each picture, like the time Jake burned the Thanksgiving turkey and they ate cereal instead. Or when Emily tried to give Zoe a haircut that ended with both of them in tears and silence for a week. Emily laughed, and it wasn't forced. It was the first time in a long time Sarah saw her daughter's guard drop, even if just slightly. Upstairs, Max paced in his room. He'd overheard their laughter, and it made something twist inside him. He wanted to be angry, he'd held on to that anger like armor for so long. But hearing Emily laugh like that stirred something else. Jealousy. Confusion. Longing. Was he the only one still holding on to the past? Max sat on his bed, grabbed his old journal, and flipped through pages filled with scrawled frustration, questions, and grief. So many pages about missing his mom. So many nights wondering if she thought about them. If she ever would come back. And now that she had, he didn't know how to let go of the walls he'd built. The next day, Jake surprised the family with a spontaneous road trip idea, something light, something fun, just a couple hours away, to a lake they used to visit when the kids were little. Zoe and Lily were immediately excited. Emily looked intrigued. Max didn't say anything. But when Saturday rolled around, Max came downstairs, backpack slung over his shoulder, hoodie pulled up, and stood by the front door. I'm not promising to have fun, he mumbled. Jake ruffled his hair. That's fair. Sarah's eyes welled up, but she said nothing. She just smiled. They were all going together. That meant everything. The lake hadn't changed. The trees still rustled the same. The dock still creaked beneath their weight. Sarah stood at the edge of the water, watching Jake skip stones, Zoe shrieking with laughter nearby as Lily tried to catch frogs. Emily and Max stood off to the side, watching them. After a moment, Emily nudged her brother. You know, you don't have to stay mad forever. Max looked at her, his expression unreadable. I'm not saying forget, she added. Just, maybe remember that we all lost something. And maybe now, we can start finding parts of it again. Max looked down at the water. After a moment, he picked up a stone and threw it. It skipped once. Twice. Sank. I'll think about it, he muttered. Emily smiled. That's something. That night, as they drove home with the younger girls asleep in the back and soft music filling the car, Sarah glanced into the rearview mirror. Max wasn't smiling. But he wasn't scowling either. He was looking out the window, a slight softness in his eyes. And in that reflection, Sarah saw a small crack in the wall she'd feared would never come down. A small step. But it was something. The next week brought an unexpected shift, one that tested everything Sarah thought she was ready for. Jake had planned a backyard barbecue. Nothing fancy. Just a casual get-together with a few neighbors and old friends. It was something he used to do every summer, a tradition that had quietly faded over the years. But now that Sarah was back, he wanted to bring it back. He wanted normalcy, a new chapter. Are you sure? Sarah asked that morning, standing at the kitchen counter, stirring a bowl of coleslaw with an anxious grip. Jake nodded. Yeah. It'll be good. The kids need to see that life keeps moving forward. And you deserve to be seen. Not hidden. That word hit her harder than she expected. Hidden. She had felt that for years, like a ghost lurking in the background of a life she used to live. But now. She was here. Present. Trying. Still, she worried. By 4 p.m., the backyard was alive with laughter, music, and the sizzle of hot dogs on the grill. Kids ran around with water balloons, Jake was manning the grill like a pro, and the patio table was loaded with bowls of potato salad, chips, and lemonade. Sarah stood near the house, clutching a glass of iced tea. She hadn't seen some of these people in over a decade. That's when they walked in, Jake's old friends from college, Mike and Lisa, accompanied by their 2 kids. Lisa had always been blunt. Lisa spotted Sarah almost immediately and walked over, arms crossed and a polite, but cold, smile on her lips. "Well," Lisa said. "If it isn't the comeback of the century." Sarah's cheeks burned, but she kept her smile steady. "Hi, Lisa. It's been a while." Lisa nodded, taking a sip of her drink. "Yeah, like 10 years. We didn't think we'd ever see you again." Jake didn't talk about it much, but we all saw what he went through. Sarah swallowed the knot in her throat. "I know. He carried so much. I'll never be able to repay what he gave to the kids. Or what I took." Lisa tilted her head, still staring. "Are you planning to stick around this time? Or is this another phase?" Before Sarah could answer, Emily appeared beside her, eyes sharp. "She's not going anywhere," Emily said firmly. "She's trying. That's more than a lot of people ever do." Lisa raised her eyebrows, taken aback by the teenage fire in Emily's voice. "Well. Sounds like you've got your daughter's support." "She's earning it," Emily added, before turning to Sarah. "Come on, Mom. Dad needs help with the drinks." The word Mom hit Sarah like lightning. She followed Emily, barely holding back tears. Later that evening, while the sun dipped below the trees and fairy lights began to glow across the fence, Sarah found herself alone at the patio table, watching Jake laugh with Mike. She could see how much Jake had held together. For years, he had been the glue. The safe place. The everything. Zoe and Lily were playing tag with the neighbor kids, their giggles echoing through the yard. Max stood near the drink table, talking to another teen. Emily sat by the fire pit, scrolling her phone but occasionally glancing over at her mom with something like cautious approval. Sarah felt a warm presence at her side. "Jake." "Hey," he said, handing her a plate of grilled corn. "You okay?" "I survived, Lisa," Sarah smirked. Jake chuckled. "She's a lot. But you handled it." "I wasn't sure I could," she admitted. But then Emily stepped in. "She called me Mom, Jake." Jake smiled, proud and a little emotional. "She sees you trying." "They all do. Even Max." Sarah glanced toward her son, still closed off but slowly softening. "Sometimes I wonder if they'll ever fully forgive me." Jake looked at her, his voice low and honest. "Maybe not completely. But forgiveness isn't a single act. It's 1,000 small ones. You just keep showing up. Day by day." Sarah leaned into him for a moment, feeling the strength in his words. That night, as the last guests left and the stars began to peek through the sky, Sarah sat on the porch swing. One by one, the kids had said goodnight, Zoe and Lily first, then Emily. Even Max had mumbled a quiet, good night, before heading upstairs. It was progress. Slow. Messy. Honest. And it was happening. It started with an innocent school assignment. Emily had been tasked with writing a personal narrative for her English class, "A turning point in your life," the prompt read. Something meaningful. Something honest. She had stared at the blank page for hours, chewing the end of her pen, before the words started to spill out. They came slowly at first, but then like a storm, memories, feelings, moments she hadn't said aloud, not even to herself. She wrote about the day her mom left. And then, about the day she came back. Jake found her at the dining room table late that evening, her laptop still open, her fingers resting on the keys, unmoving. "You okay, Em?" he asked, gently. Emily looked up, startled. Yeah. I wrote something. For school. I don't know if I should turn it in. Jake sat beside her. Want me to read it? She hesitated. Maybe. But. I think Mom should read it first. Sarah read the letter sitting on the edge of her bed, the soft hum of nighttime filling the space around her. Her hands trembled as she held the pages Emily had printed out and slid under her bedroom door without a word. The title read. The Day Everything Changed. Sarah swallowed hard and began. I used to pretend I didn't have a mom. It was easier than explaining the truth. Easier than saying she left. People always look at you differently when you say that. But now, she's back. And I don't know how to feel. I want to hate her. I want to be angry every time she smiles like nothing happened. But then she does something, small, like fixing my favorite breakfast, or remembering how I like my socks folded, and it throws me off. It's like part of her never left. Like part of her always knew she'd come back. She missed everything. My first crush. My science fair. Max's total meltdown when the car broke down in the snow and we had to walk 2 miles to the gas station. Lily's first words. Zoe's obsession with glitter. But here's the thing, I see her trying. I see her eyes when she looks at us, like she's searching for the kids she left behind and trying to catch up to who we are now. And maybe that's what forgiveness looks like. Not forgetting. Just, seeing the effort. Watching someone rebuild with bare hands even when they know the foundation is cracked. So yeah. I guess this is the turning point. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive her. But I think I want to try. When Sarah finished, she was crying, openly, silently. Her chest ached with equal parts sorrow and hope. That letter, it was the most honest thing anyone had said to her since she came home. She walked downstairs, still holding it, and found Emily curled up on the couch, scrolling her phone. Sarah didn't say anything at first. She just sat next to her and handed her the pages back. Emily didn't meet her gaze. It was just a school thing. You don't have to say anything. Sarah reached over and gently took her hand. I want to say everything. But I don't think words would be enough. Emily glanced at her, a flicker of emotion flashing across her face. I wasn't trying to hurt you with it. I know, Sarah said softly. You were just being real. And I'm proud of you for that. Emily looked away again, blinking fast. I meant it, though. I don't know if I'll ever really forgive you. Sarah nodded. You don't have to. Not now. Not ever, if you can't. But thank you for giving me the chance to try. That's more than I ever thought I'd get. There was a long silence. Not uncomfortable, just quiet, like the space between two people learning how to breathe together again. Then, almost too soft to hear, Emily whispered, I think I want to try, too. The next morning, Sarah taped the letter to the inside of her closet door. She didn't want to forget it. Not because it was painful, but because it was real. Because it reminded her that love, even fractured, was still worth fighting for. That night, as she sat beside Jake on the couch, watching an old sitcom and hearing the kids' footsteps thump upstairs, Sarah leaned into him. I think they're starting to believe in me again, she whispered. Jake smiled, brushing her hand with his thumb. That's because you're showing them who you are. Not the woman who left. The one who came back. Sarah looked up at the ceiling, where Max's room sat directly above them. I just hope Max sees it too. Jake didn't say anything. But he didn't have to. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Max was always the last to speak. The one who kept his thoughts folded into corners of his mind like laundry he refused to unpack. While Zoe and Lily clung to Sarah's side and Emily began to thaw, Max kept his distance, a silent protest written in eye rolls and one-word answers. But inside, Max was boiling. It came to a head on a Tuesday evening. Dinner had been quiet, too quiet. Sarah had made spaghetti, one of Max's childhood favorites, but he didn't even touch his plate. When Jake asked about school, Max just shrugged. When Sarah asked if he'd talk to her for a minute after dinner, he rolled his eyes and pushed away from the table. "I've got homework," he muttered, already heading for the stairs. "Max," Jake said, his voice calm but firm. "Sit. Just for 5 minutes." Max stopped. He turned slowly, and for the first time in weeks, he looked straight at Sarah. And what she saw in his eyes wasn't just anger, it was betrayal. It was heartbreak. "You think spaghetti makes up for 10 years?" Sarah's breath caught. "No. I don't." "Then why are you even trying? You think being nice and showing up at school events is going to erase the fact that you left? You weren't there when I needed you. When I cried every night for a month. When Dad couldn't stop working double shifts and Emily had to pick us up from school because no one else would." Jake stood up, his face tight. "Max." "No," Max snapped. "She doesn't get to act like she's just part of the family again. Like it's normal." Sarah stood, slowly. Her voice shook, but she didn't back down. "I'm not pretending this is normal. I'm just trying. And I know that's not enough. But I won't stop trying, Max." Max shook his head, his voice barely a whisper now. "You left us. You left me." Silence dropped like a stone. Jake took a step forward, but Sarah reached out to stop him. She stepped closer to Max, her eyes meeting his, full of grief and love and every word she'd been too scared to say. "I know I hurt you more than anyone. And I don't deserve your forgiveness. But if I could go back and change it. God, Max, I would. I live with that regret every single day. You have every right to be angry. You should be angry. But please, don't shut me out forever. Let me prove I'm not going anywhere." Max looked at her like she was a stranger. His eyes filled with tears, but he blinked them away and stormed upstairs, his footsteps pounding like thunder. That night, Sarah didn't sleep. She laid awake, staring at the ceiling, heart heavy with words she couldn't reach him with. Jake rubbed her back gently. "You did the right thing." He needed to say it. "I don't know if he'll ever let me in," she whispered. "He will," Jake said. "But only when he's ready. Not when you are." 3 days passed with barely a word from Max. He avoided Sarah entirely, leaving early for school, staying late at practice, shutting his door the moment he got home. Until Friday. It was after dark. The girls were already asleep. Jake had run out to grab medicine for Lily's cough. Emily was upstairs. Sarah sat in the living room, staring at the cold remains of a mug of tea, too tired to cry, too awake to rest. Then she heard the creak of the stairs. Max stood in the doorway. He didn't say anything at first. He looked like he was deciding whether or not to bolt. Then, he stepped into the room. "I found something," he said quietly. "In the garage." He held out a faded comic book, Spider-Man, one of his favorites from when he was 8. Sarah took it gently, fingers brushing the worn cover. "You kept this?" she whispered. Max shrugged, eyes down. "I was going to throw it away. But then I saw the inside." Sarah flipped the cover. On the inside flap, in messy handwriting, it said, "To Max. Always be brave. Love, Mom." She felt her throat close. "I remember this. I bought it the week before I left." Max sat on the arm of the couch, not quite next to her, but not across the room either. "I read it every night that year. Even when I hated you, I still read it. I don't know why. Sarah's voice was barely audible. Because maybe some part of you still believed I loved you. He didn't respond. But he didn't get up either. After a long pause, he said, "Don't expect me to just forget, okay?" "I don't," she said. "I just want to be here. However you'll let me." Another silence. Then, softly, Max said, "I don't hate you. I wanted to. I tried to. But I don't." Sarah couldn't hold back the tears anymore. She didn't sob, didn't speak, just reached for his hand. And for the first time, he didn't pull away. They sat like that for a long time. Two people, broken and rebuilding. Brick by brick. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The house felt different now. It wasn't louder, though Zoe and Lily certainly tried their best, but it was warmer. There were fewer slammed doors, fewer one-word answers, and more shared glances, cautious smiles, and moments that felt almost whole. Sarah didn't pretend everything was healed. But the silence that had once felt like a punishment now held potential. It was no longer a wall, it was a pause, a breath, a space between chapters. One Saturday morning, the family gathered in the garage. It was Jake's idea, a spring cleaning day, though they were several weeks late. The garage had become a black hole of forgotten bikes, dusty tools, and half-packed boxes that no one dared to open, until now. Sarah opened one labeled Winter Clothes 13 and found Zoe's old snowsuit, the one with the bright pink fur hood. Zoe squealed when she saw it, and Sarah helped her try it on, even though it barely fit over her elbows now. Emily laughed, snapping a photo. "You look like a glittery marshmallow." Mission accomplished, Zoe grinned. Max was at the back, pulling down an old bookshelf they hadn't used in years. Sarah watched him from a distance. They hadn't talked about the comic book night again, but since then, something had shifted. He still didn't talk much, but when she asked if he wanted eggs for breakfast, he answered. When she passed him the remote, he took it. When she stood near him, he didn't flinch. Sometimes progress wasn't loud. Sometimes it was silent acceptance. As Max shifted a box, something slid out from underneath. A photo frame. Cracked at the corner. A picture of the whole family, taken just weeks before she left. He stared at it. His younger self was holding Zoe, who was just a toddler. Sarah had her hand on his shoulder. Jake was mid-laugh. "Hey," Sarah said gently, stepping closer. "That used to hang in the hallway." Max nodded. "I remember." He held it for a moment longer, then handed it to her. "You should put it back up." Sarah's throat tightened. "Are you sure?" He didn't look at her, but his voice was steady. "Yeah. We're still a family, right?" She nodded slowly. "Yeah. We are." By the afternoon, the garage looked like a new space. Clean, open, full of possibilities. "I think we deserve pizza," Jake declared, wiping his hands with a rag. Garage cleaned, no one got injured, only 3 spiders screamed in terror. "I'd call that a win." "Pizza!" Zoe shouted, spinning in her too small snowsuit. Emily rolled her eyes. "Can we not eat like 8-year-olds for once?" "Pizza is eternal," Jake said with mock gravity. "It transcends age." Sarah laughed. It came easily now, without hesitation. The sound surprised her. She caught Jake looking at her, smiling. "You're different," he said quietly, while the kids ran inside to wash up. Sarah looked down at her hands. "Maybe. I think I'm remembering who I was before I lost myself." Jake nodded. "And maybe you're becoming someone even better." That night, while the kids were all winding down, Zoe and Lily giggling in their bunk beds, Emily doing homework in her room, and Max watching a movie downstairs, Sarah sat on the edge of her bed, holding the old photo in her lap. She studied each face. The way Max had smiled back then. The way Jake had looked at her. The way she'd held on to the youngest ones like she was afraid they'd disappear. She took a deep breath and walked out to the hallway. The nail was still there. A little crooked. A little bent. But still strong enough to hold a memory. Sarah hung the photo back in its place. It didn't erase anything. But it belonged there. Later, as she passed Max in the hallway on the way to bed, she nodded toward the picture. "Thank you. For letting me hang it up." He looked at it for a second, then back at her. "I didn't do it for you," he said. Sarah smiled gently. "I know." Downstairs, Jake turned off the lights and joined her on the couch, the quiet hum of the fridge filling the silence. "They're coming back to you," he said. "One by one." Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder. "No," she whispered. "We're coming back to each other." And for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like the end of something broken. It felt like the beginning of something new. It was a quiet Tuesday when the past came knocking, literally. Sarah was folding laundry in the living room, surrounded by warm piles of mismatched socks and faded t-shirts. Lily was playing on the floor with her dolls, narrating their imaginary world with dramatic flair, while the hum of the washing machine filled the background. Then, knock knock knock. Not the usual ring of the doorbell. Not the neighbor kids asking to play. It was sharp, almost impatient. Sarah wiped her hands on a dish towel and opened the front door. And there she was. Heather. Jake's sister. Heather had always been the sharp one. Polished. Opinionated. Protective to a fault. When Sarah left, Heather had been one of the most vocal critics, blaming, cold, and unforgiving. She stood on the porch now, arms crossed, eyes scanning Sarah like she was a page she'd already read and didn't like the ending of. "Wow," Heather said. "You really are back." Sarah stiffened. "Hi, Heather. Want to come in?" Heather raised an eyebrow. "Should I?" In the kitchen, Heather sat with a cup of coffee, eyeing everything. The new curtains. The school photos on the fridge. The evidence of Sarah's return. "So," she said after a long silence, "what's the deal? Midlife crisis over?" Sarah flinched, but didn't rise to it. "No. But I am trying to fix what I broke." Heather scoffed. "Fix it? You walked out on 5 kids. On Jake. You think baking cookies and playing house makes that okay?" "I know I can't undo what I did," Sarah said, her voice steady. "But I came back. I came back for them. For Jake. For me. I'm not here to pretend it didn't happen. I'm here to rebuild, whether people forgive me or not." Heather leaned back. "You know Jake was a wreck, right? We all were. I helped raise those kids when he couldn't even get out of bed some mornings." Sarah nodded. "I know. And I'm thankful. I'll always be thankful for what you did for them." There was a long pause. Then Heather said something unexpected. "Emily called me. A few nights ago. She said you helped her with a school project. That you've been different." Sarah blinked. "She did?" "Yeah," Heather said quietly. "Said she's starting to trust you again. That she doesn't know how to feel, but you're trying." Sarah's eyes welled up. She didn't know what to say. Heather stared at her for a moment longer. Then, finally, she set down her cup. "I'm not saying I forgive you. I don't. Not yet. But I love those kids. And if they're starting to believe in you again, I'm not going to be the one who tears that down." Sarah took a shaky breath. "Thank you." Heather stood. "Don't thank me. Just don't screw it up. When Jake got home, Sarah told him about the visit. He listened without interrupting. "Wow," he said. "Heather showing up without a warning. That's something." "I was expecting a fight," Sarah admitted. "But I think she wanted to see it for herself. That I'm really here. That I'm not walking away again." Jake pulled her into a hug. "You're doing more than staying. You're showing up." That night, Sarah found a note in her room. Folded, tucked into her pillow. It was from Emily. "Heard Aunt Heather showed up. You must have really changed if she didn't bite your head off. Just so you know, I'm proud of you. Even when I don't say it out loud." Sarah held the note to her chest, tears spilling silently down her cheeks. Later, as she checked on the girls, she found Zoe fast asleep and Lily mumbling in a dream about glittery dragons. She tucked them in gently. In the hallway, she paused in front of Max's door. It was cracked open. He was at his desk, earbuds in, working on something. She knocked softly. He glanced up, then nodded. "Yeah. Just wanted to say good night." Max gave a small nod. "Night." Then, as she turned to leave, he called out, "Hey, Mom." She froze. Slowly turned. Max didn't look up. "Thanks for sticking around." Sarah's breath caught. "I always will," she whispered. In a house that once echoed with silence and absence, a single word, "Mom," was enough to make it feel like home again. Spring crept in slowly, greener mornings, later sunsets, and the hum of life returning to the neighborhood. The kids seemed lighter, freer. Even Max smiled more. Zoe and Lily were now inseparable from Sarah, dragging her into their imaginary games and art projects like she'd never left at all. But it was Emily who changed the most quietly. She was never the dramatic one, never the loudest or most emotional. But lately, Sarah could sense something brewing beneath her daughter's calm surface, something she wasn't saying. It started with the journal. One evening, Sarah was folding laundry when she spotted a notebook wedged beneath the couch cushion. She picked it up without thinking, until she saw her name. "She says she's back, and part of me wants to believe her. But what if she leaves again? What if we get used to her, and it all disappears?" Sarah closed the notebook immediately, her heart pounding with guilt. She hadn't meant to pry. She wanted to put it back, pretend she never saw it, but it was too late. The words were branded in her mind. Emily was scared. Still. And Sarah had no idea how to help her daughter believe this time was different. The next day, Sarah knocked on Emily's bedroom door, her heart hammering. "Yeah." Emily called. Sarah pushed the door open gently. Emily was at her desk, headphones around her neck, paint smudged on her fingertips from an unfinished art project. "Can I come in?" Emily nodded, a little wary. Sarah held up the notebook. "I didn't mean to read it. It was under the couch. I opened it by accident." Emily's expression darkened instantly. "So you did read it?" "Just a line," Sarah admitted, voice low. "But it told me everything I needed to know." Emily crossed her arms, retreating behind her invisible walls. "That's private. You had no right." "I know," Sarah said, stepping closer. "And I'm sorry. But I'm not sorry I found out how you feel. Because I want to talk about it. I don't want you to carry all this alone." Emily looked down at her lap, blinking quickly. "You left," she said. "I had to grow up in a way no kid should. I took care of them. I helped Dad. And when you came back, part of me wanted to hate you. But part of me didn't. That's the part that scares me. Because if you hope, you might get hurt again," Sarah said quietly. Emily nodded. "Exactly." Sarah sat beside her, keeping a gentle distance. "I don't expect trust overnight," she said. And I don't expect you to pretend everything's okay. But I want you to know, I'm not going anywhere. Not again. Not ever. Emily stayed quiet. Then, in a voice so soft it cracked, she asked, "Do you ever think about leaving again?" Sarah's heart broke. "Every day I think about how I could have stayed. And every day, I remind myself that I'm here now, and I will never make that mistake again." Emily's lip quivered. "It's hard to believe you. Even when I want to. I'll keep showing you," Sarah whispered. "As long as it takes." That night, Emily left her journal on Sarah's nightstand. A page was folded down. Sarah opened it slowly. She didn't yell. She didn't defend herself. She just listened. Maybe that's what I needed most. I'm not ready to say I forgive her. But today, I believed her. The next morning, Emily came downstairs wearing a new t-shirt Sarah had bought her, a small thing, but one Emily had ignored for weeks. She sat down at the table, poured cereal, and passed the milk without a word. It was ordinary. It was everything. Later, as Sarah cleared the dishes, Emily slid a small sketch across the counter. A drawing of their family, all 7 of them, sitting on the front steps of their house. Everyone was smiling. Sarah looked up. "I drew it last night," Emily said, not meeting her eyes. "Thought we might need a new picture on the fridge." Sarah's eyes blurred. "It's beautiful." Emily shrugged, but there was the tiniest smile at the corner of her mouth. "Yeah. I guess it kinda is." Sometimes healing didn't come in loud declarations or dramatic gestures. Sometimes it came in pencils, in journal pages, in a picture taped to a fridge. And in a daughter learning how to believe again. For years, Jake had been the rock. The constant. The one who held the house together when it was crumbling. The one who dried every tear, packed every lunch, drove to every emergency room visit, and sat through every sleepless night when the kids cried for their mom, and she wasn't there. But even rocks erode. And on a quiet Thursday evening, Jake finally cracked. It started with something small. Lily had forgotten her homework folder. Zoe spilled juice on the carpet. Max snapped at Emily over the TV remote. Nothing earth-shattering. Nothing out of the ordinary for a house with 5 kids. Sarah offered to take care of the carpet, but Jake waved her off, scrubbing it with too much force, his jaw clenched tight. "Jake," Sarah said gently, "it's okay. I can handle it. I said I've got it." She stepped back, sensing the shift. Later, during dinner, Jake barely touched his food. He nodded absently when someone asked him a question, smiled thinly at Zoe's jokes, and offered no protest when Lily refused broccoli. It wasn't until after the kids had gone to bed that it all spilled out. Sarah found him in the garage, sitting on the old workbench, the lights off, staring into the dark. "Jake." He didn't look at her. His hands were clasped in front of him, his back rigid. "I can't keep pretending it's fine," he said finally. Sarah froze. "What do you mean?" "I mean this." He gestured vaguely. "You coming back. The kids adjusting. Me pretending like I'm not, tired. So tired, Sarah." She stepped closer, her heart aching. "I didn't realize you were still carrying so much." He gave a bitter laugh. "You didn't realize? I've been carrying it, every day for 10 years. And I didn't complain, not because it wasn't hard, but because I didn't have the luxury of breaking down. If I cracked, this whole house fell apart." Sarah sat beside him. The air was thick between them, full of unsaid things. Jake turned to her, eyes rimmed red. "You got to run away." "I didn't. I stayed. I did the birthday parties. The ER visits. The nightmares. And now you're here and everything's better. Just like that." Sarah reached for his hand, but he pulled it back. I'm not asking you to forget what I did, she said quietly. Or to pretend I didn't leave you alone with all of it. I know I can't make it right. But I'm here now, with you. I want to carry the weight too. Jake looked at her, really looked, and the years of exhaustion showed in his face like cracks in old stone. You know what I hated most, he said. That I started to resent the kids. Not because I didn't love them, but because I had to do it all alone. And I was scared if I said that out loud, I'd be a bad dad. Sarah's voice broke. You're the best dad I've ever known. He shook his head, wiping his eyes. I'm just a guy who kept going because no one else could. And I see that, she whispered. I see everything you did. I see everything you gave up. And I am so sorry. She touched his shoulder. I don't want to erase what happened. I want to honor it. I want to honor you. Jake, you held this family together with duct tape and hope. And now, you don't have to do it alone anymore. He let out a long, shaky breath. I don't know how to let go of it. The anger. The fear. Then we do it one day at a time, she said. Together. That night, as they lay in bed, Jake finally let himself cry. Not quietly, not politely, but fully, deeply. For all the years he'd buried the pain. For all the guilt, the loneliness, the nights he whispered, I'm trying, into the dark and got nothing back. Sarah held him. No speeches. No promises. Just her presence, steady and unflinching. And for the first time, he got to be the one who broke. Because healing wasn't just for those who left. It was for those who stayed, too. The mailbox rarely held anything interesting. Bills. Catalogs. Junk. Occasionally a thank you card or something from the school. But on a mild April afternoon, tucked between a grocery flyer and a dental appointment reminder, Sarah pulled out an envelope that stopped her cold. It had no return address. Just her name, Sarah Whitmore, written in neat, careful cursive. It wasn't from a lawyer. It wasn't from Jake. It wasn't from any of the kids. But somehow, she knew exactly who it was from. She sat on the porch, letter in hand, heart pounding like she'd just run a mile. The kids were still at school, Jake was running errands, and for once, the house was quiet. She opened it slowly, hands trembling. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper. Mom. I don't know if I'll ever send this. But if I do, it's because I need you to know how I really felt, not just what I said to your face. When you left, I didn't cry at first. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself I was better off without you. But then Lily asked me why you didn't come to her kindergarten concert. And I couldn't answer. Then Zoe had a nightmare and screamed for you, and I had to pretend I didn't feel like breaking inside. I told myself I was strong. But what I was angry. And scared. And hurt in a way I didn't even have words for yet. But I also never stopped wondering where you were. If you were okay. If you missed us. I didn't want to admit it, but I needed you. I still do. I don't know what kind of future we have, but if you're reading this. I'm trying. I'm really trying. Max. Sarah read the letter once. Then again. And again. Each word sliced and soothed all at once. Max. Her Max. The quiet one. The guarded one. The boy who had every reason to hate her. He had written a letter, not to lash out, but to reach out. That night, Max came home from baseball practice and found Sarah in the kitchen, making pasta. She didn't say anything right away. She simply handed him the letter. He froze. You found it? You mailed it, she said, her voice calm. He looked away, cheeks burning. I thought about burning it. But I needed to know if you'd still want me after reading it. Sarah stepped forward. Max, there is nothing, nothing, you could ever write, say, or feel that would make me stop wanting to be your mom. His eyes welled up. Even after all that stuff I said. I needed to hear it, she whispered. And I'm proud of you. For telling me the truth. For being honest. That's the bravest thing you've ever done. He looked down at the floor, breathing hard. I'm still scared, he said. That this doesn't last. That one day we wake up and you're just gone again. I am, too, Sarah admitted. I'm scared every single day. But I'm still here. We're here. And that's all we can do. They stood in silence for a beat. Then Max did something he hadn't done in years, maybe since he was a child. He hugged her. Not a side hug. Not a one-arm, awkward shoulder pat. A real hug. Tight. Unapologetic. And Sarah held on like her life depended on it. Jake found them like that when he walked through the door. He didn't say anything. Just smiled, quietly, and went to help set the table. Later, as they all sat around the dinner table, Zoe talking with her mouth full, Lily telling a story no one could quite follow, Emily rolling her eyes in affectionate exasperation, and Max sneaking seconds of garlic bread, Sarah caught Jake's gaze across the table. He raised his glass of water in a silent toast. She raised hers, too. No words. Just understanding. Because in a family stitched together by pain and time and second chances, sometimes a letter was the turning point. And sometimes a hug was the beginning of everything new. Spring was in full bloom now. The backyard exploded in color, tulips, daffodils, and wild dandelions scattered across the grass like nature's confetti. The kids spent more time outside than in, laughing louder, playing harder, healing faster. On a breezy Sunday afternoon, Sarah sat on the porch steps with a glass of lemonade, watching Zoe and Lily chase bubbles across the lawn. Max was shooting hoops with Jake in the driveway, and Emily was stretched out under a tree, sketchbook in hand, earbuds in. It felt peaceful. It felt whole. Until Lily stopped mid-run, turned on her heel, and marched straight up to Sarah, hands on her hips. Mom, she said, serious as a judge, why did you leave? The question hit like a punch to the chest. Sarah blinked. What? Lily repeated, slower this time, like Sarah might have just missed it. Why did you leave us before? I don't remember it much, but sometimes. I feel it. Like when Zoe had her birthday last year, and everyone got sad for a second. And Max always gets weird when we talk about stuff from when we were little. Sarah set her glass down, hands suddenly cold. That's a big question, Lily. I'm big, Lily said proudly. I'm 8. Sarah took a breath. Then patted the step beside her. Come here. Lily plopped down with a little bounce, kicking her feet. Sarah stared out at the backyard, heart thudding. When I left, I was really sad. And really confused. I thought I wasn't good enough to be your mom. I thought maybe, if I left, you'd all be better off without me. Lily's brows furrowed. But that's silly. We're your kids. Why would we be better without you? I know that now, Sarah said softly. But back then, my heart was messy. It felt broken. And sometimes, when people hurt inside, they make really bad decisions. Lily picked a dandelion and twirled it in her fingers. Did you miss me? Every single day, Sarah said. Her voice cracked. I missed your laugh. Your silly stories. Your hugs. I missed you, Lily. All of you. Lily looked up at her with wide, curious eyes. Will you ever leave again? Sarah didn't hesitate. No. Never. I promise. Lily studied her face, as if searching for a crack, a doubt, a shadow. Then she seemed satisfied. Okay. She nodded. Then I forgive you. Sarah blinked. You do? Yep, Lily said simply. But I'm still gonna draw a comic where a mom turns into a dragon and flies away to a volcano. Then she comes back and helps her kid defeat homework monsters. Sarah laughed, tears slipping down her cheeks. I'd read that comic. You can be the dragon, Lily said, grinning. But a nice dragon. That night, Sarah tucked Lily into bed. Zoe was already asleep, her face smushed into a pile of stuffed animals. Lily grabbed Sarah's hand before she could leave. Hey, Mom. Yeah, sweetie. I think you're way better than a volcano dragon. Sarah smiled through her tears. Thanks, baby. That means everything. Downstairs, Sarah found Jake cleaning up after dinner. She asked me, Sarah said quietly. Lily. She asked why I left. Jake froze, sponge still in hand. How did you handle it? I told her the truth, Sarah replied. A version of it, anyway. And she forgave me. Jake exhaled, leaning against the counter. They're stronger than we think. They are, Sarah agreed. Stronger than we ever gave them credit for. He looked at her. And so are you. Later, Sarah sat in bed, flipping through Lily's notebook. On the last page was a drawing, a little girl with big curly hair riding on the back of a smiling dragon, soaring through the sky over volcanoes, homework monsters, and a rainbow. At the top, Lily had written. Sometimes, the people who leave are the ones who come back stronger. Like dragons. Sarah closed the notebook, pressed it to her heart, and smiled. Because healing didn't always come in grand gestures. Sometimes, it came in crayons, in bedtime questions, and in a little girl who forgave with her whole heart. As spring continued to bloom around them, Sarah began to notice subtle shifts in herself, shifts she hadn't expected. After all the years of fighting, surviving, and navigating the labyrinth of regret, she was finally starting to feel like herself again. Not the person who had left, but the one who had returned, who had fought for her family, and who was, in many ways, beginning to rebuild from the inside out. The mornings were quieter now. Instead of waking up to the tension and exhaustion of before, Sarah woke up to the sounds of birds, the faint hum of kids' voices downstairs, and the warm comfort of knowing that her family was whole again. Or at least, well on their way to being whole. But that didn't mean it was easy. Jake still had his days. Max, too, still carried his burdens. The kids, though happier, were all learning to trust again, each in their own way. The scars from the past couldn't be erased in an instant. But Sarah had learned one very important thing in the past few months: healing was a journey, not a destination. And it was okay to take it one step at a time. One Wednesday afternoon, after the kids had gone to school, Sarah sat on the couch, leafing through an old photo album. The edges of the pages were worn, the pictures fading with time. There were pictures of her with the kids when they were younger, Lily's first birthday, Zoe's dance recital, Max's Little League games. There were some pictures of Jake, too, back when he was the strong, steady anchor of their family, even before they had children. She paused on a picture of herself, pregnant with Emily. The soft glow of joy in her eyes was unmistakable. A look she hadn't seen in years. She closed the album, her heart swelling. She didn't regret the past, not the choices, not the mistakes. It was a part of her story. It had shaped who she was. And now, it was a story she could finally share with her children, without the burden of shame. Later that day, Sarah went to the kitchen to make lunch, but as she reached for the peanut butter, a knock sounded at the door. It was Jake. He had that look in his eyes, serious, but not angry. Concerned, but calm. "Everything okay?" she asked. Jake stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "We need to talk." She raised an eyebrow. "About what?" "About us," he said quietly. "About where we're headed." Her heart skipped a beat. Jake, I know we're doing better. And that's exactly what I wanted to talk about. He hesitated, then continued. I don't think I ever really gave us a chance after, well, everything that happened. I just kept moving forward, like it was the only thing I could do. But I've realized something. Sarah stepped closer, the tension in the air palpable. We've been so focused on fixing things, on getting back to where we were, that we forgot to figure out who we are now. Together. As a family. As us. Her throat tightened. Jake. I'm sorry for not saying it sooner, but I'm not just here because of the kids. I'm here because I want to be. I want to rebuild with you. Not just because we have to, but because I want to. Sarah's heart swelled. It had been so long since she'd heard him speak like this. Vulnerable. Honest. And for once, not trying to hold everything together by himself. I want that too, she said softly, a tear slipping down her cheek. But I don't know how. Jake reached out and gently wiped her tear away. Maybe that's okay. Maybe we don't need to know how right away. Maybe we just need to try. That night, after dinner, Jake took Sarah's hand and led her out onto the front porch. The evening air was cool, the sky painted with hues of orange and pink as the sun set behind the trees. The house was quieter than usual. Emily and Max were in their rooms, Zoe and Lily curled up on the couch watching a movie. They were safe. They were together. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like enough. Jake pulled out a small, folded piece of paper from his pocket. What's that? Sarah asked, her curiosity piqued. I wrote something, Jake said, his voice nervous but sincere. I don't really do this whole romantic thing, but I thought it was time I said it. He unfolded the paper, and Sarah saw that it was a letter. A letter to her. Sarah. I'm not the same person I was when you left. I'm not the same person I was when I stayed. But I'm learning that sometimes the hardest thing to do isn't to move on. It's to stay and grow with the person next to you. I've spent so much time trying to fix everything, trying to make sure the kids were okay, that I forgot to check in with you. With us. And I'm sorry for that. But I'm ready now. Ready to start over, ready to rebuild, together. I don't have all the answers. But I have you. And that's enough. Jake. Sarah smiled through her tears as she took the letter from his hands. That was perfect, she whispered. You're perfect. Jake's eyes softened, and he pulled her into a warm embrace. We'll figure it out. Together. And in that moment, Sarah realized that she had everything she needed. She didn't need to be perfect. She didn't need to have all the answers. She didn't even need to know what the future held. What she had was a family. A second chance. And the knowledge that, even in the most broken moments, love could find a way. The weeks that followed were filled with subtle changes. The kind of changes that weren't immediately noticeable but, when added up, made all the difference. The house, once strained and filled with tension, now felt lighter. There was more laughter around the dinner table, more conversations in the evenings, and, most importantly, more quiet moments where no one needed to say anything at all to feel understood. Sarah and Jake were learning to navigate their new reality, taking things one day at a time, building trust in each other, and in their ability to face what came next. They still had bad days. Sometimes old wounds would resurface, sometimes the pressure of parenting 5 kids, managing the house, and figuring out their own marriage would feel like too much. But they faced those days together, which, at the end of the day, was all they could ask for. And yet, there was still one thing that lingered in the back of Sarah's mind. Max. It had been weeks since Max had opened up to her through the letter, but she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more he wasn't saying. It wasn't that he had pulled away, it was that he had quietly settled into this new version of their family, as though trying to convince everyone, and maybe himself, that everything was fine. But Sarah wasn't sure it was. She had been paying attention, watching him closely. His quiet, brooding moments. His distance. His unwillingness to really engage when it came to any deeper conversations about what he was feeling. And so, on a chilly Friday evening, with the kids gathered around the TV, Sarah decided to take a different approach. Max was sitting in his usual spot on the couch, slouched over, his eyes glued to the screen. Sarah paused in the doorway, studying him. She had to admit, he was growing into a young man, tall and lean, with his father's jawline in her eyes. But there was something more. A deep layer of complexity to him. And Sarah couldn't ignore it any longer. She took a deep breath and sat next to him. He didn't look over at her, but she could feel his tension. "Max," she began softly, "can we talk for a minute?" He shrugged, not meeting her gaze. "About what?" "About you," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "About what's been going on inside." He shifted uncomfortably. "I'm fine, Mom." "Really?" "I don't believe you," she said simply. "And I'm not going to pretend that I do." Max sighed, rolling his eyes. "I'm just trying to keep things normal. You know. I don't want to be the one who keeps bringing up all the bad stuff." "I get that. I really do," she said. "But sometimes, pretending that everything is normal doesn't make it so." Max looked away, fiddling with the edge of the couch cushion. "I'm not the one who left, Mom. I'm not the one who didn't come back." His words hit harder than she expected. "I know," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "I left. I hurt you. I hurt all of you. And I will never, ever be able to undo that. But I'm here now. And I'm not going anywhere. If there's something you're holding on to, I need you to know that I'm ready to listen." Max sat up straighter, but his expression remained guarded. "I don't even know what I'm holding on to. I just don't get why you left. Why you thought it was okay to just go. And now everything's all different. It's not like it was before, and I don't know if I can trust it." The words hung in the air like a cloud. Heavy. Unsettling. "I know it's different," Sarah whispered. "And I know you're scared. You're not the only one who feels that way. But what I'm trying to say is that we can't go back to how it was before. We can't change the past. But we can change the future. We can choose to move forward, together." Max's jaw clenched. "But what if you leave again? What if it's just temporary, like last time?" "I won't leave," she said, her voice firm and unwavering. "Not again. I promise you." Max stared at her, his eyes searching hers, as if trying to find a hint of doubt. But he didn't find any. "I don't know how to believe you," he said quietly. Sarah reached out and placed her hand on his. It was a small gesture, but it was enough. "You don't have to believe me all at once," she said softly. "But just know that I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. And I'm going to keep showing up for you. Every single day. Even when it's hard." For the first time in what felt like forever, Max didn't pull away. He didn't stiffen or brush her off. He just sat there, quiet, with her hand resting gently on his. It wasn't a resolution. It wasn't a grand reconciliation. But it was a beginning. And sometimes, that's all they needed. The next morning, Max came down to breakfast earlier than usual. He had his usual grumpy teenager face on, but there was something different. He grabbed a seat at the table without argument and even shared a laugh with Lily, who was, as always, in her usual cheerful mood. It wasn't much, but it was something. Sarah watched him for a moment before turning to Jake, who was reading the newspaper at the table. "You know," she said quietly, "I think we're getting there. It's going to take time. But I think Max is finally starting to trust again." Jake looked up and nodded, his expression softening. "I hope so. I really do. Sarah smiled. I think we're all getting there. One step at a time. And for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt like they were heading in the right direction. Summer was nearing its end, and with the turning of the season, came an inevitable shift in the house. Sarah could feel it in the air. The kids were growing up, each of them in their own way. Max had begun to open up more, his moods less volatile, his smiles more frequent. Emily, with her quiet intelligence, had taken to helping her younger siblings with their homework, almost like a second mother. Zoe, ever the optimist, had organized a neighborhood talent show that the whole family participated in, even if it meant a few awkward dance moves and off-key renditions of old songs. And then there was Lily, the free spirit, who continued to bring laughter into every corner of their lives. She had taken to drawing more, filling notebooks with stories of mythical creatures and grand adventures, some of which included dragons. Sarah was still laughing about that one. But amidst all the noise and laughter, there was a calm that Sarah hadn't felt before. It was as though the pieces of their family, once scattered and broken, were slowly finding their places again. On a Saturday morning, Sarah woke up early and found herself sitting alone on the front porch, a warm cup of coffee in hand. The sun was just rising, casting a golden glow over the yard, and for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt a sense of peace. Her mind wandered to the past, to the times when everything had felt so uncertain, so fractured. She remembered the long nights of uncertainty, the weight of the decisions she had made, the fear of not being enough. But those memories didn't sting the same way anymore. They had shaped who she was, yes, but they no longer held her captive. As the day began to stir with the sounds of the kids waking up, Sarah made a decision. It wasn't just about fixing things or finding ways to make up for the past. It was about building something new, something stronger. They were all finding their way, but Sarah knew that it was time for her to take another step in her journey. Later that afternoon, after the kids had scattered to their various weekend activities, Sarah and Jake sat down together in the living room. There was something about the quiet moments between them that had always been their best conversations, when no one else was around, when it was just the two of them. Jake, Sarah began, her voice steady but full of purpose. I've been thinking about something. Jake raised an eyebrow, his attention shifting to her. I think it's time for me to go back to work, she said, the word surprising even herself. Jake looked at her, a soft smile tugging at the corner of his lips. I thought you might say that. Sarah chuckled nervously. I've been home for so long, taking care of everything here. But I've realized that I'm more than just the mom in this house. I need something for myself, too. A new purpose, a new challenge. Jake nodded, clearly supportive, though he didn't say anything right away. I've been hoping you'd come to that decision. You deserve it, Sarah. You've been so strong for everyone else. Now, it's your turn. Sarah smiled, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. I think I'm ready to try again. And I think the kids are ready for it, too. Jake reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. We've got this. Together. It wasn't long before Sarah found herself back at an old favorite coffee shop she used to frequent before everything fell apart. The familiar scent of espresso and the quiet hum of conversations filled the air, but it felt different this time. She was different. She had sent out a few applications, but it was the one she had just received the call for that made her heart race. It wasn't the dream job she had once imagined, but it was a start. It was something she could be proud of. It was something that was hers. She sat down at a corner table, her fingers nervously tapping the edge of her coffee cup as she reviewed the job description again. The work would be challenging, but Sarah knew she was up for it. She wasn't the same woman who had left all those years ago. She had been through fire, and she had emerged stronger, more determined. The phone buzzed in her pocket. It was Jake. She smiled as she answered. Hey, she said, her voice warm. I was just thinking about you. You're up early today, Jake said, his tone light. Everything okay? I'm good. Actually, I think I might have found something, Sarah said, her heart racing a little faster now. A job. It's not everything I want, but it's a step. It's something. Jake's voice softened. I'm proud of you, Sarah. You're doing it. You're moving forward. I couldn't have done it without you, she said, her eyes closing for a brief moment. This family, it's everything. But I think it's time for me to start something new. Something just for me. I'll support you no matter what, Jake replied, his voice steady. You've got this. The next few weeks were filled with both excitement and nervousness as Sarah settled into her new routine. The job was demanding, but rewarding. There were days when she felt overwhelmed, but the feeling of accomplishment at the end of each day kept her going. At home, things continued to evolve. Max had begun to open up about his own dreams, things he hadn't shared before. Emily had started thinking about college plans, and Zoe had grown more confident in her role as a leader among her friends. Lily, as always, kept the family laughing with her endless creativity, while Jake continued to be the steady rock that kept everyone grounded. There were still moments of doubt, moments of fear, but Sarah knew now that she didn't have to face them alone. The foundation was there, trust, love, and the understanding that, no matter what, they would always be there for each other. One evening, as Sarah sat on the porch with a glass of wine, watching the kids play in the yard, she thought about how far they had come. The house was still filled with noise, some of it chaotic, some of it joyful, but it was home. Her home. Their home. She took a deep breath and smiled. This was a fresh start. A new beginning. And for the first time in years, she felt ready for whatever came next. As the weeks continued to pass, the family's rhythm began to feel like something truly sustainable. Sarah's new job was becoming a constant in their lives, bringing with it both challenges and triumphs. She was balancing work with family life, and although it was hard, it was also rewarding. The satisfaction of providing for herself, her kids, and contributing to the family in a new way gave Sarah a sense of empowerment she hadn't realized she was missing. But with every step forward, there came moments that tested the strength of their resolve. One evening, Sarah returned home from work to find the house unusually quiet. Normally, the kids would be scattered around, either working on homework, playing video games, or engaged in some other noisy endeavor. But today, there was a stillness to the home that made her pause. She set her bag down by the door and listened. A muffled conversation from the kitchen caught her attention. She followed the sound and found Max and Emily sitting at the table, their heads bent together, deep in conversation. Max looked serious, his usual guarded expression gone. Emily, as always, seemed to be trying to lighten the mood, but there was an underlying tension between them that Sarah couldn't ignore. "Hey, what's going on?" Sarah asked, stepping into the kitchen. Both of them looked up, their faces a mix of surprise and something else, a hint of concern. "Nothing, Mom," Max said quickly, standing up and trying to cover the awkwardness. "Just talking." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "I can tell something's up. You know you can talk to me, right?" Max hesitated, then glanced at Emily. It was Emily who finally spoke. "It's just, well, Max and I were talking about Dad," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "About how he's been kind of distant lately. And about what that means for us." Sarah felt her heart tighten. She knew that Jake had been working long hours at his job, trying to keep up with everything, and his stress had been taking a toll on him. But she hadn't realized just how much it was affecting the kids. "What do you mean by distant?" Sarah asked, sitting down at the table with them. Max shrugged, clearly uncomfortable. "I don't know. He's been there, but not really. Like, he's always working or out with friends, and when he is home, he's just, not really here, you know." Sarah turned her gaze to Emily, who nodded in agreement. "It's like he's checked out. I think he's overwhelmed. But I don't know if he's even aware of how it's affecting us." Sarah's mind raced. She knew that Jake had been dealing with his own set of challenges, but hearing the kid's concerns made her realize just how much he had been internalizing. He was often the steady rock, the one who was there for everyone else, but lately, it seemed like he hadn't been giving himself the space to process his own feelings. Sarah had seen the way he had been working himself to the bone, trying to keep the family afloat. But she hadn't fully understood the cost it was having on him. "Thanks for telling me," Sarah said after a long pause. "I'll talk to him. But I want you both to know something. This family doesn't work if we're not honest with each other. You're both right, he's been struggling. But that doesn't mean we can't help him. We're in this together, okay?" Max and Emily exchanged a look, the tension beginning to ease between them. Emily gave a small nod, and Max muttered, "Yeah, okay." As Sarah left the kitchen, she felt a renewed sense of determination. She had spent so much time focusing on her own personal growth and healing, but now it was time to turn that attention to Jake. She had seen him withdraw in recent weeks, and while she understood it, she also knew that they couldn't afford to let distance grow between them. Not now. Later that evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Sarah sat with Jake in their living room. The weight of the conversation hung between them, unspoken, but Sarah knew it had to be addressed. "Jake," she began, her voice softer than usual. "We need to talk." Jake looked up from his phone, startled. "About what?" "About you," she said, her gaze steady. "You've been distant. And I know it's because you're stressed, but we can't keep pretending like everything's fine." Jake sighed and rubbed his face with both hands. "I know. I've been trying to hold it all together, and I guess I thought if I just kept working, if I just kept pushing, it would all get better. It's not working, though," Sarah said gently. "Jake, we're a team. You don't have to carry everything on your own. Not anymore." "I don't know how to let go," Jake admitted, his voice thick with frustration. "I feel like I've failed you all. I promised I'd take care of everything, and now I'm barely keeping my head above water." Sarah reached for his hand, pulling it into her lap. "You're not failing anyone, Jake. We're here for you. All of us. You don't have to do this alone." Jake looked at her, his eyes filled with exhaustion. "I don't want to fail you. But I'm scared. Scared of letting go, scared of being the reason everything falls apart again." "You're not going to fall apart," Sarah reassured him. "We've already been through the worst. Now, we can build something better. Together. I'm not asking you to do it all. I'm asking you to let me in." Jake's gaze softened as he squeezed her hand. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I've been so focused on everything that I forgot about us. We'll get through this," she said softly, her voice full of certainty. "But you need to start letting me help. Let us help." Jake took a deep breath, nodding. "I'm sorry I've been distant. I don't want to be that way anymore. Let's make it work." Sarah smiled, her heart swelling with hope. It wasn't a perfect resolution. It wouldn't be easy. But they were taking the first steps toward healing, together. The next morning, Sarah woke up early, her mind buzzing with the conversation from the night before. She had a feeling things were going to get better, not overnight, but in small, meaningful ways. That's how it had always been for them. It was the little things that added up. She glanced over at Jake, who was still asleep beside her, his face relaxed for the first time in weeks. It was a good start. She didn't have all the answers. No one did. But as she looked at her family, she knew that as long as they kept talking, kept showing up for each other, they would find their way. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like everything was going to be okay. The days following their heart-to-heart conversation were filled with small adjustments that, over time, would make all the difference. Jake began making a conscious effort to connect with the kids more, carving out time for them in ways that didn't feel rushed or forced. He took a Saturday morning off to attend Emily's soccer game, something he hadn't done in months. Max, who had always been a bit more reserved, seemed to ease up, a small but genuine smile tugging at the corners of his lips whenever Jake joined in on family activities. For Sarah, it wasn't just about Jake's changes, it was about the whole family. As she watched her kids grow, as they began to express themselves more openly, and as she reconnected with her role as both a mother and an individual, it became clear that they were moving into a new chapter. One where balance, respect, and support were the cornerstones. One particularly cold evening, the family gathered around the living room after dinner, the faint crackle of the fireplace adding warmth to the room. The kids were sprawled out on the couch, their energy high despite the late hour. It was a rare quiet moment, and Sarah savored it, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Mom, remember when we used to do family movie nights?" Zoe asked, her voice full of excitement. "Can we do that again?" Sarah glanced at Jake, who was sitting next to her, and smiled. "I think we could all use a good movie night, don't you?" The kids cheered, and soon enough, the living room was filled with the sound of laughter and the opening credits of their favorite film. The movie, a classic that they'd watched 100 times before, played as everyone settled in, some with popcorn, others cuddling up in blankets. But it wasn't just the movie that made the night special, it was the feeling that surrounded them. The closeness, the ease, the love that permeated the air. Sarah felt a sense of accomplishment that wasn't just tied to her job or her personal growth, it was in this moment, with the people she loved most, all gathered together. After the movie ended, Jake stood up, stretching. "All right, everyone, let's wrap it up. It's past bedtime." "But Dad," Zoe protested. "We're not done with family time yet." Jake grinned. "You're right. How about we play a game before bed?" Everyone groaned and laughed, but it wasn't long before the table was set, cards in hand, and the game began. Max and Emily, always the competitive ones, immediately began strategizing, while Lily and Zoe took a more laid-back approach, content to laugh at the silly moments that popped up. As they played, Sarah looked around the room, and it struck her just how far they'd come. She'd once feared that things would never feel whole again, that the family she loved so much would always be fractured by the chaos and grief of the past. But now, here they were, stronger than ever. They'd endured hardship, heartache, and setbacks, but through it all, they had never lost the love that held them together. Over the next few months, Sarah continued to grow in her own role, taking on more responsibilities at work and continuing to find ways to be present for her kids. She learned how to balance her career and her family life without feeling like she was failing at either. But what mattered most was that, despite the challenges, she was there, really there, when her family needed her. Jake, too, had found his rhythm. He worked hard but had learned how to carve out time for the family. He took weekends off more frequently, and his relationship with the kids deepened. He also started seeing a therapist to deal with the feelings he had kept bottled up for so long. His vulnerability, which had always been a quiet strength, began to shine in ways that strengthened their bond even further. The kids were also blossoming. Emily had applied to several colleges, and though the process was stressful, she faced it with confidence, knowing that her family was there to support her every step of the way. Max, once quiet and withdrawn, was now opening up more, even finding the courage to talk about his dreams and fears. Zoe was embracing her role as the energetic, optimistic glue that held them all together. And Lily, ever the imaginative one, continued to bring lightness and laughter wherever she went. Sarah often found herself reflecting on how far they had all come. They had survived the storm. And now, as they stood together in the calm, she knew they had created something beautiful, a family built on trust, love, and the willingness to face challenges head-on. It was a Saturday afternoon, and the family was gathered around the kitchen table, planning their next big family outing. The kids were arguing over which beach to visit, Jake was joking around with Zoe, and Sarah was sitting back, smiling at the simple chaos. As she watched her family interact, a thought crossed her mind, this was the family she had always dreamed of. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. They had built it from the ground up, brick by brick, day by day. And that, Sarah realized, was the most beautiful thing of all. Later that evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Jake and Sarah sat on the porch, the cool night air brushing past them. They were quiet for a long time, simply enjoying the peace. Finally, Jake broke the silence. "Sarah," he began, his voice soft. "I can't believe how far we've come. It's like we've lived a lifetime in just a few years." Sarah leaned back, looking up at the stars. "I know. But it feels like we're exactly where we're supposed to be." Jake smiled, his hand finding hers in the dark. "Yeah. I guess we are." They sat in silence, comfortable and content, as the night stretched on. They had come through the storm. Now, they were standing together on the other side, stronger, wiser, and more in love than ever before. And as Sarah looked out at the life they had built, she knew that no matter what came next, they would face it as a family, united, resilient, and ready for whatever the future held. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?